We're at Reserve Creek today for a workshop about biodiversity on farms. Biodiversity is the variety of all things plants, animals and microorganisms and the ecosystems that they exist in. The management of biodiversity on cattle farms is essential for the provision of ecosystem services like clean water, air, healthy pastures and soils. An important part of today's field day is about sharing knowledge and experience of other farmers.
So the Tweed is a very special place, and it's a very special place because of its evolutionary history and its biogeographical history. So the Tweed in this part of Australia has moved north from Gondwana land. It's had a very stable climate, and we have what's called the Macleay-McPherson overlap, and so this has given this area a very stable and wet climate. If you add to that we have a diversity of terrain, and this is a caldera or a volcanic landscape, and a variety of soils, you've got the recipe for fantastic plant and animal biodiversity. So we have 1,500 plant species here or more, 100 threatened animal species. We have 55 different plant communities here, and in 1986 the area was recognised for its biodiversity values because we had the Gondwana World Heritage Rainforest areas all listed.
We're currently at our property at Kudra. The name of the property is Gurumbal, which is Bunjalung for hoop pines, which you can probably see in the background. The property is just under 600 acres, and we bought the property probably 40 years ago. As far as the bushland areas, I think one of the most beneficial things you can do for starters, if you've got stock, is to fence them off. And even though they were bushland, just having the cattle excluded, there just seems to be, I don't know, just there's a different ambience within that vegetation, and most of them have got, small creeks within the areas, and that, obviously freshens up because they're not having cattle walk through it. Very little weed control because very quickly just the improvement in the condition, the weeds never established even more to what they were, a few around the edges, and that was about it. As far as biodiversity on the farm, I think that having that better vegetation encourages more wildlife and generally, the health of flora, fauna, and also the grazing areas.
On farm, those biodiversity values provide the ecosystem services for productive farms, and the fact that farmers are growing plants or they're raising animals, those plants and animals are all part of the broader environment, and so the ecosystem services, clean air, clean water, healthy soils, that all plays a really fundamental role in raising healthy livestock and growing healthy productive crops.
So in reference to the drought, because the property the way it is just has a reasonably small watercourse right through the property, which runs into pools, and most of the pools are in forested areas, of which I think 3 of those areas we've fenced off. So the creek runs in, goes into a deeper pool. So when the drought came, our dam dried up, became quite dangerous, cattle bogged, so we fenced that off. And then we needed water for 2 of the paddocks, so we used the water from one of the water holes in the forested area. And I think just having that, because we kind of looked and thought, where's a nice deep hole to put the pump in, and there it was. And in the time we were pumping water out into troughs, it hardly went down at all. So it was obviously getting some groundwater coming in. So that was a benefit. I think that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't in a forested area.
So for farmers, having a healthy waterway means increased protection of your soil and your riverbank itself. So having a good vegetated creek bank will protect your bank against erosion to a large degree. Also having a bit of an undercut in your creek bank can be a good thing, and that's where your riparian vegetation really helps, because it's going to lock in the bank, and then naturally as streams meander around the landscape, you might see a bit of undercutting of your bank. Now that provides really good habitat for a whole range of aquatic creatures, including platypus, that like to burrow into creek banks. So if you've just got either an eroding bank or a gently sloping bank, that can be great in so many ways. But having that diversity of habitat types on your creek can be really important for wildlife. So in this Shire, you know, we've got such a diversity of plant types that a healthy waterway here would mainly look like a rainforested stream. You know, so you're likely to see rainforest overstorey, lots of different shrubs and layers throughout the forest, and then clean water running through your creek. That's the ideal setting. Unfortunately, due to historic clearing and disturbance factors, you're not likely to see that unless you're up in the headwater streams. So obviously if you've got livestock on your property, fencing to keep your livestock out of the creek is the best thing, the single best thing you can do, because livestock trample the banks, they defecate and urinate in the water, they cause channeling and rutting of the surface and a whole host of other problems. Providing an alternative watering point for stock is really important, so you can just buy a plastic trough with a float valve on it and hook it up to a water supply, and cattle will actually prefer to drink out of good clean water troughs than they will out of a creek line. So yeah, it's really important to leave any in-stream wood and vegetation in place when it falls in the creek, because they create staging posts for fish during flood events to migrate further upstream or downstream. You get a bit of scour around some fallen logs and root balls, which creates, you know, deeper pools in the creek and a diversity of habitat types. A lot of people want to tidy it up, but creek lines are naturally untidy places, and you know, we shouldn't be cleaning them up all the time. We shouldn't be mowing the grass right down to the creek edge either. We should be leaving a buffer of vegetation there and leaving you know, some natural features both on the creek bank and in the stream itself.
When we came to the property, the main weed on the place was groundsel. I think most paddocks had groundsel in them, and very tall trees. Up the back there were large groundsel bushes. Then after the groundsel was controlled came the camphor laurel, so there was quite a big invasion of camphor laurel, and still the properties surrounding us have quite a lot. Again, it was, well, we want to get rid of this weed, and trees were injected and left in situ. And the camphor laurel, there's probably, doubt if there'd be any mature camphor laurel trees, but there are seedlings still coming in. With weeds, you can never just say, well, yes, I've got a lovely paddock out there, I've got a really nice piece of forest. You can't just turn your back and walk away, because you don't know what weed will be starting to come in next.
If you're a landowner and you don't have livestock, looking after your creek banks might look like finding out what sort of weeds you've got growing on them. These places are so fertile and so moist that weeds will inevitably colonise a fairly bare creek bank. So, you know, progressively managing your weeds to foster natural regeneration can be a really good thing. Obviously there's usually a good seed bank next to creek lines. Establishing a good dense canopy along a creek bank will also shade out a lot of other weeds and keep the water cool and clear. So yeah, restoring riparian vegetation is a key action that people can undertake.
As everybody knows, we're facing global environmental challenge at an unprecedented level, and I really like to be able to work with landholders to basically repair and rehabilitate our amazing environment here in the Tweed. The importance of biodiversity, it's very simple. We obtain all sorts of resources, but it also nurtures us on a completely different level for mental health. It provides us with a sense of community. It is actually part of who we are, and we have, I suppose, the responsibility to look after that because it's all about the place that we live and the place that we love.